All right, grab your notepads, clear your desks, and listen up. Welcome to today's Explainer. Now, for this one, I need you to step into a recently declassified historical briefing with me. I want you to imagine you're a straight-laced, maybe slightly bewildered FBI agent back in the 1960s. Your tie is pulled tight, your desk is literally overflowing with frantic letters, and you are actively investigating a massive, viral analog rumor sweeping the entire nation. You see, a song has infected the youth. It's called Louie Louie. And somehow, without a single byte of digital data, teenagers across America are peer-to-peer sharing what they believe to be highly explicit, top-secret information. Well, today, we're going to crack open this exact case file, and in the process, we're going to uncover a massive hidden rhythm to human history. So let's just quickly review the official case briefing outline here. We'll start with the viral panic itself, look at the research methodology behind it, dive into the opposing tides of we and me, identify key cultural markers, figure out how to adapt our communication styles, and then wrap it all up with an end-of-term review. Section 1. Viral Panic Without Internet. Let's open up the file on this Louie Louie anomaly and really ask yourself, how exactly do you go viral with no Wi-Fi? Seriously, imagine a full-blown social media-style panic, the kind of contagious outrage that just sweeps across the country faster than bad weather, but executed entirely without the internet. Back in 1963, a rumor sparked that the Kingsmen's recording of this totally innocuous song about a lovesick sailor, Louie Louie, was secretly just packed with obscenities. The rumor was you just had to listen really closely or play it at the wrong speed to hear them. And of course, the kids absolutely loved it, mostly because it was a secret that completely panicked the authority figures. And oh man, panic them it did. Listen to this. This is an actual quote from a terrified parent's letter sent directly to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in early 1964. It really establishes the sheer scale of the hysteria over what was, honestly, just a harmless song recorded in a crummy studio. But parents, school officials, church members, they were all convinced that rock and roll had finally crossed the line into absolute filth. So they started bombarding the Justice Department, demanding action. And you know what? That pressure sparked an utterly absurd 30-month FBI investigation. Just picture this. Grown men, federal agents, my colleagues, sitting around in a government lab playing a 45 RPM record at 33 1/3 RPM, at 78 RPM, at insanely slow speeds, just straining to decipher these supposedly dirty lyrics. They interrogated record executives. They tracked down the song's original writer, Richard Berry. But, and you can't make this up, they never actually bothered to talk to the one person who undeniably knew what words were sung, Jack Ely, the lead singer of the Kingsmen. Eventually, in May 1965, the FBI lab had to officially conclude that the song was, quote, unintelligible at any speed. Which brings us to Section 2, the pendulum research methodology. Okay, so to understand this ridiculous micro-mystery, we actually have to pivot and look at a massive macro truth about human civilization. Why were the parents so incredibly primed to panic, and why were the kids so desperate to rebel? Well, researchers Michael R. Drew and Roy H. Williams developed a methodology that proves this whole Louie Louie thing was actually just a symptom of a much larger generational tipping point. Their framework doesn't just look at a single decade, it synthesizes thousands of years of history to track shifting cultural moods. It's based on the laws of mass action, basically the idea that while individual people are unpredictable, massive groups of people are highly predictable. It tracks the overall momentum of society. And the sheer historical scope of their research is genuinely mind-blowing. They analyzed 3,000 years of data, looking way back through the centuries to track these rhythmic 40-year cycles. What they discovered is that society behaves exactly like a giant pendulum, predictably swinging back and forth between two very distinct sets of values, the we and the me. Moving to Section 3, Tides of We and Me. To really grasp this, we look to the author's brilliant metaphors of ocean tides and lunar gravity. They use these to describe the massive, equal but opposite forces pulling at the masses. Think of the me cycle like the gravity of the moon. It pulls individual tides of pride higher and higher, deeply focused on personal liberty and individual expression. On the flip side, the we cycle is like the momentum of the water itself, crashing in massive waves of polarity, completely focused on the group, the collective, and working together for a common purpose. Let's break that down even further by contrasting the classic fable of the ant and the grasshopper. The we cycle, that's the ant. It values working together, duty, obligation, sacrifice, authenticity in the tribe. But the me cycle, that's the grasshopper.
It's all about individual expression, personal liberty, chasing big dreams, hero worship, and well, just being cool. And remember, we move between these two poles, not as isolated individuals, but collectively, as an entire society.
So this cycle right here represents the full 80-year heartbeat of our society. One complete cycle takes 80 years. That's 40 years swinging one way and 40 years swinging the other. It tracks the shift from halfway down a we cycle to halfway up a me cycle, which is usually a fun period of rainbows, unicorns, and I'm okay, you're okay. But then it swings all the way over to the opposite extreme, halfway up a we cycle, bringing ideological righteousness, judgmental legalism, and the I'm okay, you're not okay witch hunts. It's just an endless, unstoppable rhythm, systole and diastole.
Section 4. Art, Lit, and Cultural Markers.
So you might be wondering, how do agents out in the field, or, astute students of history, actually monitor these massive societal shifts? Well, you do it by paying close attention to early cultural markers. Art, theater, literature, these all act as what the researchers call alpha voices. These voices actually start hinting at new values up to a full decade before mainstream society even catches on. They're the early warning signs that the pendulum is hitting its absolute limit and is getting ready to swing back the other way. Let's look at some specific markers. Back in 1946, during a deep we cycle, the Broadway play Born Yesterday was already openly mocking me values. Fast forward to 1963, and that whole Louie Louie panic perfectly aligned with a brief transition window where society was actively pushing back into a me cycle. The kids were craving individual rebellion, while the adults were desperately trying to cling to we conformity. Later on, a book like Jonathan Livingston Seagull perfectly captured the sappy, hyper-individualistic peak, or zenith, of the me cycle. These cultural artifacts, they tell us exactly where the pendulum is hanging. Section 5. Adapting your communication style. Let's pull this theory out of the clouds and ground it in the practical. By understanding these cycles, we can actually adapt our personal communication styles to survive and even thrive during these shifts. Because, let me tell you, tactics that work brilliantly during a me cycle will completely fall flat during a we cycle. Step 1 is always identifying which cycle you're currently in. In a me cycle, people respond to push communication. Think direct marketing, highlighting personal status, telling people exactly how a product makes them uniquely cool. But in a we cycle, you have to pivot to pull communication. You've got to focus heavily on authenticity, transparency, and how whatever you're saying actually benefits the wider group. We can also easily map this pendulum concept right onto our personal lives. As the researchers point out, the hardest choices we make are usually between two good things. During a me cycle, society is obsessed with extrinsic motivators, big houses, fancy cars, the outward symbols of success. But during a we cycle, that focus totally shifts to intrinsic motivators, things like autonomy, mastery, and a sense of purpose. Ultimately, the goal is balance, because if you take responsibility, a very we trait, too far, it becomes oppressive slavery. But if you take freedom, a me trait, too far, it just becomes depravity and isolation. Finally, Section 6, End-of-Term Cycle Review. Okay, for your end-of-term review, let's just quickly summarize the actual mechanics of this cycle. Every 40-year swing starts with a 20-year upswing, where these new values are gaining serious momentum. Eventually, it hits the zenith. This is the tipping point where the beautiful dream of either extreme just goes way too far, and a dark underbelly emerges. The we becomes a crushing, mandatory conformity. The me turns into empty, plastic posing. And that is always followed by a 20-year downswing, where society, totally exhausted, falls away from that extreme and heads back toward the middle. So let's apply this to the recent past. The transition window from 2013 to 2023 represents the second half of an upswing deep into a we cycle, and the very beginning of a downswing from it. And according to the pendulum theory, this specific window is historically marked by intense ideological righteousness. It is a classic era of I'm okay, you're not okay. It's characterized by judgmental legalism, deep societal division, and modern-day witch hunts as groups tightly lock ranks around their specific, chosen causes. Which leaves us looking right over the horizon. The current 40-year we cycle, which began transitioning way back in 2003, will eventually run its course, and that pendulum is inevitably going to swing back. The massive collective exhaustion of the we cycle will absolutely spark a renewed hunger for individual expression. Just like those kids in 1963 used Louie Louie to shatter the conformity of the 1950s, a future generation is going to rebel against the heavy collective obligations of our current era. So, as we prepare to eventually exit the we, the real question you have to ask yourself is this: Are you ready for the return of me? Class dismissed.